Good morning, everybody. So today, our theme today is silence and contemplation. So we shall learn all about that from my perspective, and we'll see how you may connect or resonate with that. So we live in an age of constant stimulation and notifications, commentary and reaction. Yet across cultures and centuries, wisdom traditions have pointed towards two simple tools for clarity and transformation, which is silence and contemplation. They are related, but they're not identical. Silence is the clearing, contemplation is the seeing. Silence is a soil, and contemplation is a seed taking root. Today I want to explore both through spiritual traditions, through the natural world, and through real human stories. So I'm going to show you a little video now, which I bought this DVD some time ago, and I actually only just finished watching it last night. But I used to watch snippets of it, and it gave me a certain sense of feeling inside. So I want you to, while you watch this, just see what's going on inside you and as you watch it.
Morning.
This was Carthusian monks in the French Alps. So for those that did watch or see that, what was going on inside as you watched it? For me, I was really joining that silence and wondering what kind of life that might be, to live in, because they are a silent order. And the only time they do chant and they pray, and then outside of the monastery there, they meet together and they do have a chat and what have you. So they do have moments where they speak with each other, obviously. But watching that I just felt like there was a sense of peace, and then knowing that these people who are there praying every day for the benefit of others, it just felt good to have something there. And you can look at different religions and faiths, like Buddhist monks have that same idea of silence, although not necessarily a silent order, but they can be in meditation quite often. It's part of their ritual, and again, knowing that there's people doing that across the world, affects me, as well as the stories of it affecting people around them in their communities and wherever they are. So it sort of sets something off inside. Well, what's happening when I focus on that? What's inside? So this silence goes on to contemplation. These two tools in which we are exploring today. So when I was younger, I used to go into a place called APOW Park, which used to be across the road from where I lived. And of course, I was a young family. I was very busy, and sometimes you just need to take yourself away just to get a little bit of rest and respite. And I used to go for a walk around the park, and because it's quite a large park, it used to be quite quiet. Obviously, listening, you might have some children playing on the rides, or people walking the dogs, but generally it was quite quiet. And I used to just relish that peace, away from the noise and distraction of my own home. But one thing I noticed when focusing on what was happening in the park, I could hear, because it was quite in the center of the city, I could hear the hum of the city going all around. And that hum of the city was almost like the heartbeat of the city, as though it had some life of its own. And again, I thought that was just wonderful to listen to. Everybody's going about their daily business, and I'm just there walking or sat in silence, just listening to everybody just on their daily business, doing whatever they needed to do. And I felt that good, deep sense of calm. And this is what this silence brought, this type of connection. So, and these days, I usually find that I'll go into the countryside or into the woods. So I think we all can connect when we walk into the forest somewhere. We have that sense of calm, and we listen to the silence. So, not so long ago, I used to live on Haddo Estate, and again, I had the wonderful opportunity at any time of the day just to walk down. I used to sometimes walk down, especially in the summer, 11 o'clock, approaching midnight, and this is when all the animals used to come out, and you get owls and deer and all kinds of different things. So, but the moments I remember most is going outside, and we're going to do the garden or having some washing out or whatever it was, and I'd just stop and take a moment and I'd listen, and again it was just silence. And I thought that was it was just so wonderful, not to be overpowered by cars and vehicles. And so for me, getting up first thing in the morning is the one time where the brain has gone from deep sleep and it's now starting to wake up. And one of the things I noticed with me, I don't know if everybody else is the same, is that the mind then tries to go straight into, oh, what's happening in the day? I have to do this, and it starts racing on. It's like, oh, and it's trying to plan things and do things. And so I get up, I get in the shower, and I quite often realise, what's my brain doing? I better just hold on a minute. I've not even got into the day, so I stop that thought, and I just continue. I have my shower and get changed and get properly into the day. And my day usually starts, I go downstairs, I go into my room, and I spend 10-15 minutes just in that point of silence and contemplation. Because without that, my brain has already been going for half an hour or an hour or so, and by the time I get into work, it's had no rest or respite, and then I'll never get the opportunity to have that break. The mind needs a break just as much as the body. So again, using these tools is important, not just to give yourself a rest, but also for answering questions and deeper questions you have about life, that connection you have with something maybe greater than ourselves, or just questions that you might have of, why is this happening? Why is that happening? So silence as a tool. Silence is not the absence of sound, it is the presence of attention. That's the way I like to think of it. So in the 13th century, Persian poet Rumi wrote, "Silence is the language of God, all else is poor translation." So I always thought, well, if God spoke a language, what would it be? Every language, I suppose, or no language at all. How does he communicate? And I like to think it's within the silence that we communicate, we gain the answers we want or we need. So across traditions, silence is not emptiness, it is a different kind of fullness. In the Hebrew scriptures, the prophet Elijah encounters God not in the wind, earthquake, or fire, but in a small, still voice. In Buddhism, silence is the container for insight. And in Christian monasticism, easy for me to say, silence is a discipline that reveals the moments of the heart. So silence is a tool because it reveals what noise conceals. So, getting caught up in everyday life, we miss our deepest sounding board, which we feel through our thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And so this is a development of practice which I have brought into my daily life throughout many years of contemplation. Refining that, using these two tools to answer some of the deeper questions, to look at why do I feel this way? Why is this thought arising? And in that way, I understand myself a lot better. And I think that is a real key here, is to understand, well, what is it that I am thinking and why am I thinking that way? So a real world example, Thomas Merton, a Trappist monk living in the Abbey of Gethsemane, embraced radical silence. Yet he became one of the most influential spiritual writers of the 20th century. And he wrote, "The world of men has forgotten the joys of silence." So Merton discovered something crucial. Silence did not shrink his world, it expanded it. In silence he became more compassionate, more engaged with civil rights issues, more attentive to global suffering. Silence did not remove him from the world, it refined his presence in it. So I used to have that same idea that I used to be very inward looking. and not very much out facing. So what I felt inside never, quite often, did not reach my outer shell, if you like. And a lot of people didn't realise the type of person I really was, or the type of person I truly wanted to be. And so I used to think that in the silence I could help people in the way of prayer, in the way of different tools, really, that the presence might go on outside of me, outside the mind. That was my thought process. But I turned that around eventually and thought, I need to face people and engage face to face, and in that way people will truly see me as who I want to be. And in doing that, I become fully the person I want to be, but fully the person inside that's going to be projected outside. And the answers I want will not be just inside. I will experience them as physical experiences. So silence in the natural world. So if you go into the forest, what do you notice? You'll notice that the forest is not actually silent. There are insects, wind, distant birds, but the noise is not intrusive. It is coherent, just like me when I used to walk in the park. That noise I heard in the background was a part of that silence, a part of life that goes on. The natural world teaches us that silence is not the absence of life, it is life in balance. I have this thing about balance. I like to think that to fully experience life how we want it to be, we have to live in balance. Now that means internally as well as externally. So consider how snow falls. It transforms the landscape not through force, but through quiet accumulation. I don't know if you've noticed that when it's gently falling, when the snow is falling, I think it dampens the noise and it seems quieter. It's rather that, or there's just less cars and nobody really wants to go outside. But I always want to get my coat on and get my shoes on and go out in the snow while it's gently falling. There's something calming about that. And I find that deeper connection because my mind is focused on what's actually happening. If we don't have snow constantly throughout the year, it's something that brings a moment of potential connection. So we can think of seeds underground. Germination happens in darkness and silence, and growth does not require noise. So quite often we fill our lives with noise, but we don't always need that for ourselves to grow inside. So I like to think of silence being the seeds of potential, the seeds of something waiting for something greater. And in that silence, we can explore what that is. So the process of practicing silence. So maybe we can have a practical example right now. We just had it a certain moment ago when the computer went off. So Malcolm, you're ahead of us a little bit. We'll just stay quiet. I know silence can be sometimes uncomfortable for some people. We'll just stay quiet just for a minute. And while we do this, I want you to notice what's going on inside. So we might think of or realize thoughts that's happening, but we don't have to engage. I don't know if you've ever tried that, not engaging with thought as it arises and allowing it to just be gently put to one side. And allowing noise without having a label on it, but allowing it to be just part of your moment, your experience. Okay, so what was going on through your mind during that very brief moment of silence? I mean, we experience this, you know, in memorial, when we're at a memorial, or like on the 11th of November. What was happening? Did you feel? Did you notice thoughts? Were they trying to compete with the silence? This is all about recognizing what's actually going on inside. And then when you spend that extra time just noticing that, you become more in control. When you're more in control, you choose whether you decide to engage with the thoughts. It might be something that's important, but right now, a minute is not going to encroach on whatever it is that arises. So the goal is not trying to stop to think or stop thinking. The goal is to stop chasing thoughts. So over time, silence reveals restlessness, fear, creativity, longing, and insight. It is a diagnostic tool, and it shows us what is already there. Maybe that's something you might want to take away with you. Maybe it's something you already practice, but it's one of the things I practice on a regular basis, which allows me to notice what's going on inside. Because if I keep pushing things down, then it almost gets hidden until eventually you get a trigger that brings it all out, and so it comes out in a rush. So that's the whole point of addressing these things before they have a chance to build up, or before you put a wall in place so you forget about it until a later date. So the story of Nelson Mandela. While imprisoned on Robben Island, Mandela endured years of isolation and forced silence. He later reflected that prison gave him space to think deeply about leadership and reconciliation. He learned to listen, even to his adversaries. Silence matured his vision, and his silence did not harden him, it softened him. So he became almost a different person by the time he came out of prison. And of course, we all know that story. So I want to show you another quick video now.
The technique of pausing leads us to a wonderful paradox. The more we slow down, the more life appears to expand. In other words, the more frequently we learn to pause and take a breath, the more space we feel and the clearer our mind becomes. This lucid mind can then make clear and unhurried decisions throughout our day.
So that was the art of contemplation. So we move on to our next tool here, contemplation. So Richard Road, he runs courses, and he does a course on contemplation, using it as a specific tool and going deeper into ourselves. And he writes here, the purpose of science is to unlock life's many mysteries and attempt to understand the way things work. but there are subjects that may always be impenetrable to science. You are such a mystery. While we may one day understand how human beings work, our true depths lie beyond the domain of objective understanding. To know what we really are, we will have to go beyond the mind itself. This is the purpose of the art of contemplation. The mind is a bit of a mystery. We don't fully understand it, and yet it's there all the time, influencing us. And so maybe we should have a better idea of what's going on there. So there is a wonderful paradox of the more we slow down, the more life appears. And I like to try and, especially in the last few years, I can look back over many years and think how things were drawn to me when I needed it. But I like to actually recognize that in the moment instead of having to look back and recognize it in the past. And in that way, I can be more fully engaged. And when I'm more fully engaged, I connect better with the people I'm speaking with, or the work that I have to do, or anything that I have to generally practically have to do in life. So if silence clears the ground, contemplation plants the question. Contemplation is sustained attention towards meaning. It is not mere thinking, it is reflective awareness guided by wonder. So contemplation in spiritual traditions. In Christianity, contemplative prayer moves beyond asking for things and rests in awareness of God. In Hindu philosophy, the Upanishad method of neti neti, not this, not that, is a contemplative discernment. And in Buddhism, insight meditation, vipassana, investigates the nature of reality. So the common thread, contemplation asks, what is truth beneath appearance? So a real-world example, Albert Einstein famously said, the important thing is not to stop questioning. Curiosity has its own reason for existing. His breakthroughs were not born of fantastic busyness, but long contemplative thought experiments. He imagined riding on a beam of light. And contemplation requires imaginative patience. It asks, what if I stay with this question longer? This is not just passing thought or a focused dissection through research, but a quiet self-inquiry where you gently place your awareness, and within the silence, the answers arise. So contemplation in the natural world. Watch a river long enough and you notice patterns. It yields, it shapes stone. It flows around obstacles without losing direction. Contemplation is like watching a river. You observe without interfering. Or consider migratory birds. They navigate by subtle cues, magnetic fields, stars, seasonal rhythms. Contemplation tunes us to subtler guidance, conscience, intuition, moral clarity. Henry David Thoreau at Walden Pond withdrew not to escape society, but to contemplate it more clearly. He wrote in Walden, I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately. Contemplation allowed him to examine consumption, freedom, government, and simplicity. He left the woods not as a hermit, but as a clearer thinker. Sometimes we need to withdraw from our everyday lives so that we are not distracted while we let our thoughts go deeper into a clearer understanding of what we are experiencing. We see this in many different faith traditions, this moving away gaining clarity, going on our own for a while, just to be away from distraction. So the process of contemplation. So it can be structured like this. Choose a question. So I'd like to do that right now. Just choose a question, something that truly matters in your life right now. Just anything. So hold it gently and don't force an answer. Don't try and come up with the answer to that question. Just hold it for a second. And then maybe engage through multiple lenses. What emotion arises as you think of this question? What is rational? What is spiritual? What is practical? And normally I would leave you a lot longer to contemplate that. I didn't give much time to really truly look inside and see what's arising. I don't know if any of you may have had a moment of transition. You've thought of the question and then immediately an answer may be arising. When we sit with that a little bit longer, we then focus on our body. What is our body trying to tell us? And that's where we look at emotion and what's going on practically. Our body reacts, it twitches, it itches, we want to move, we're unsettled, and that can be a residual of the type of question that you have brought up in your mind. But it took silence to allow that question to flourish. So contemplation and silence, that's why they go hand in hand so well. And in that way, the contemplation ripens and that question gets answered. I know that I have times of contemplation at random, just random times of the day or night. And even when I'm in the middle of something. So it can happen when I'm in the shower, as I've said. It can be in the car. When all other functions are on automatic mode and you're focused on the road, a thought might appear because everything else is in automatic. It can sometimes happen in the middle of the night. And the body wakes up sometimes before the alarm goes off. And these thoughts are sometimes a really enlightening thoughts, because my brain must be in the right kind of state in which to receive that contemplative type of pattern. Except for when I try and get up and write them down, then it all goes away again. But these moments of contemplative thought arise sometimes when you least expect it. And because we don't always realize when our mind is capable of slipping into that way of thinking. So silence and contemplation together. Silence without contemplation can become avoidance. Contemplation without silence becomes overthinking. And together they form a rhythm. Silence empties, contemplation fills. Silence steadies, and contemplation clarifies. So the modern relevance. We are overwhelmed not because we lack information, but because we lack digestion. Silence slows input and contemplation deepens meaning. So consider how leaders today face complex ethical dilemmas. Climate change, technology, polarization, reaction noise cannot solve them. So what is needed? Spacious thinking, moral imagination, and an interior clarity. I think if some of the world politicians were to slow down a little bit, it might give them a little bit more clarity as to some of the decisions that have been made, and we can really focus on some of those that's been happening in this last 24 or 48 hours even. So to bring to a close, in man's search for meaning, Frankl describes discovering that even in suffering, one retains the freedom to choose one's response. That freedom was discovered in interior space, a place of silence and contemplation, even within a concentration camp. He wrote, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response." Silence that creates that space, and contemplation guides a choice within it. The natural world does not rush, and the great spiritual traditions do not necessarily shout. The deepest truths do not compete for attention, they wait. Silence is the doorway, and contemplation is the path. In a noisy world, these two ancient tools remain radically relevant. Perhaps the most courageous act today is not speaking louder, but listening deeper.